Some messages feel heavy not because of what is said directly, but because of what they point toward beneath the surface. This is one of those moments where emotional awareness begins to rise in a very quiet way, almost like something inside is asking you to pay closer attention than usual. It is not about dramatic events or sudden revelations, but about subtle emotional shifts that slowly build until they can no longer be ignored. There is a sense here of someone close to you going through an internal struggle that is not easily visible from the outside. On the surface, they continue with life in a way that appears steady. They show up in conversations, respond when needed, and carry themselves with a kind of controlled normalcy. But beneath that outward stability, there is a deeper emotional weight that has been accumulating over time. It is not a single moment of pain, but a collection of unspoken feelings, unresolved thoughts, and quiet emotional fatigue that has been growing gradually. When people carry emotions like this for too long without expressing them, it often becomes a silent kind of exhaustion, not the kind that rest can fix, but the kind that builds from constantly holding things in. It can affect how they think, how they respond, and even how they connect with others. Sometimes they may not even fully understand the extent of what they are carrying until it begins to affect their sense of balance in everyday life. In situations like this, distance or silence is not always a sign of disconnection or lack of care. More often, it is a sign that someone is trying to manage too much internally without letting it spill outward. People sometimes believe that keeping things inside is a form of strength, especially if they feel responsible for maintaining stability for others. But over time, that internal pressure can become overwhelming, especially when there is no space to release it safely or openly. What makes emotional experiences like this more complex is that they are rarely expressed directly. Instead, they tend to appear in small, indirect ways. Changes in communication, shifts in energy, moments of withdrawal, or emotional inconsistency can all be subtle indicators that something deeper is happening internally. These signs are not always easy to interpret in the moment, especially when someone is still functioning outwardly as usual. At the same time, it is also natural for those observing from the outside to start noticing patterns or feeling a sense of emotional pull toward certain people or situations. This does not always mean something mystical or predetermined is happening. Often, it reflects emotional awareness, picking up on subtle behavioral or energetic changes that the conscious mind has not yet fully processed. Human connection is sensitive in that way. We notice more than we always understand immediately. When someone is struggling internally, one of the most common emotional responses is the fear of being misunderstood. They may worry that if they speak honestly about what they are feeling, it will be too much for others to handle, or that it will change how they are perceived. This fear can lead to even more silence, which in turn increases emotional pressure. It becomes a cycle where the less is shared, the heavier everything feels inside. Over time, carrying emotional weight alone can reach a point where it starts to affect clarity. Thoughts may become scattered, emotional responses may feel unpredictable, and even simple interactions can feel more draining than usual. This is not because the person has changed at their core, but because internal overload begins to influence how they experience everything around them. In relationships or meaningful connections, this kind of internal struggle can sometimes create distance without intention. It is not always about choosing to pull away, but about not having enough emotional capacity in the moment to engage fully. From the outside, this can be misunderstood, but internally, it is often about survival and emotional self-management rather than rejection. What becomes important in moments like this is not assumption, but awareness, not rushing to conclusions, but allowing space for understanding to develop naturally. When emotions are involved, clarity does not always arrive instantly. It often unfolds gradually, as behaviors, conversations, and emotional openness begin to reveal what was previously hidden. There are also moments in life where people begin to reflect more deeply on their internal world without necessarily expressing it outwardly. They may revisit past decisions, question current emotional states, or reconsider how they have been handling personal struggles. This kind of reflection can be uncomfortable, but it is also part of emotional growth. It often happens quietly, without others noticing, until it begins to influence external behavior. In many cases, emotional turning points are not loud or dramatic. They are subtle shifts in awareness, where someone begins to realize that continuing in silence is no longer sustainable. That realization does not automatically lead to immediate change, but it does mark the beginning of internal movement. And once that movement begins, emotional expression slowly becomes more likely over time. For the person on the receiving end of these shifts, the experience can feel confusing at first. There may be a sense that something is changing, but without clear explanation, the mind naturally tries to fill in the gaps. This is where misunderstanding can form if patience and observation are not present. Emotional clarity often requires time, and rushing it can sometimes distort what is actually unfolding. A more grounded approach in such situations is to remain present without over-interpreting every signal, to notice but not assume, to stay open but not dependent on immediate answers. Emotional awareness is strongest when it is balanced with patience, because it allows truth to reveal itself in its own time, rather than being forced into premature conclusions. If there is a deeper connection involved, what ultimately matters is not intensity, but consistency. Not emotional highs, but steady understanding. Not dramatic realization, but quiet alignment that becomes clearer through time and behavior. Real emotional clarity is built through experience, not speculation. And as situations like this evolve, what often becomes most important is the ability to remain emotionally honest with oneself, to recognize what feels stable and what feels uncertain, to understand what is real in the present moment rather than what is imagined about the future. That kind of internal grounding helps prevent confusion from taking over emotional judgment. In the end, what this kind of emotional situation points toward is not prediction, but awareness. Awareness of inner struggles that may not be visible. Awareness of how silence can carry weight. Awareness of how connection can be felt, even when not fully expressed. And most importantly, awareness of the need for patience, clarity, and emotional balance when navigating anything that involves human feeling. Nothing here needs to be rushed or forced into meaning. It simply asks to be observed with care, understood with patience, and approached with emotional honesty. As things continue to unfold naturally over time, they have reached a point where silence no longer feels safe, but speaking still feels terrifying. Heaven is aware of this exact moment. Heaven knows that if nothing changes, the distance will grow quietly, not with anger, but with resignation. That is why your awareness is being activated now. This is not about drama. This is about timing. This is about recognizing a shift before it becomes irreversible. Something in their emotional world is loosening, and when it does, truth will begin to surface in ways that cannot be taken back. Your soulmate has been replaying conversations in their mind that never actually happened. Words they wanted to say, questions they wanted to ask, confessions they rehearsed alone, late at night, when no one was watching. They wondered how you would react. They wondered if you would understand. They wondered if honesty would bring relief or loss. so they stayed quiet. But silence has a cost. It slowly convinces a person that their feelings do not matter, that their pain is inconvenient, that love must always be strong and never vulnerable. This belief has been hurting them more than any external situation ever could. Heaven sees this internal struggle clearly. That is why subtle signs have been appearing around you. Repeated thoughts, emotional triggers that seem to come from nowhere, a sense that something important is unfinished. These are not distractions, they are invitations to prepare emotionally. When the moment comes, your response will matter more than your words. Presence will matter more than solutions. Understand this carefully. Your soulmate does not want to be rescued. They want to be understood. They do not want pity. They want safety. Safety to speak without being corrected. Safety to feel without being rushed. Safety to be seen as they are, not as they pretend to be. Heaven is guiding this situation gently, because forcing truth too fast can cause fear, but delaying it too long can cause disconnection. The balance is delicate. That is why awareness is being built slowly, layer by layer. You are being prepared to listen without interrupting, to feel without defending, to stay without needing immediate answers. This is not accidental. This is alignment. Something once in a lifetime happens when two souls meet each other honestly at the right time. That opportunity is approaching, and it will test emotional maturity, not just emotional attachment. There is also something your soulmate has not fully admitted, even to themselves. They are afraid of being a burden, afraid that their pain will change how they are seen, afraid that vulnerability will cost them the connection they value most. So they carry everything alone and call it strength. But strength without support turns into isolation. Heaven does not want isolation to define this bond. That is why circumstances are shifting behind the scenes. Small delays, unexpected pauses, emotional moments that slow everything down. These are not obstacles. These are openings. When the truth begins to surface, it may not come as a dramatic confession. It may come as a quiet admission, a sentence spoken softly, a look that lingers longer than usual, a moment where they finally stop pretending. When that happens, what you do next will shape the future of this connection in ways you cannot yet imagine. Stay grounded in this awareness. Do not rush ahead. Do not assume the worst. Do not underestimate the depth of what is being revealed. Heaven is not creating fear here. Heaven is creating opportunity. Opportunity for healing. Opportunity for clarity. Opportunity for a bond that is no longer built on assumptions, but on truth. Your soulmate's silent pain is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of endurance, and endurance deserves recognition, not judgment. Very soon, the silence will break, not to cause chaos, but to restore balance. Be ready, not with answers, but with understanding. What unfolds next will feel intense, meaningful, and unforgettable. And once it begins, there will be no going back to how things were before. A quiet realization is forming beneath the surface of everything you feel right now, and it is asking you to slow down and truly observe. This phase is not loud, and it is not dramatic, but it is powerful. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that silence has protected others, but it has wounded them. They are noticing patterns they once ignored. They are seeing how often they minimize their own emotions just to keep peace. This realization did not come easily. It arrived through exhaustion, through moments of emotional numbness, through nights when they stared into nothingness and wondered when they stopped feeling fully alive. Heaven allowed this awareness to rise gently, because sudden realizations can overwhelm a sensitive heart. What is happening now is a deep internal shift. They are questioning old beliefs about love, strength, and sacrifice, and as they do, the bond between you is being re-examined, not with blame, but with honesty. You may feel a strange pull toward patience right now, as if rushing would break something fragile. That feeling is guidance. Your soulmate is carefully deciding whether it is finally safe to be real. They are weighing every past experience where vulnerability led to misunderstanding. They are remembering times when they hinted at pain, but felt unheard. This hesitation is not rejection. It is self-protection, built from experience. Heaven understands this hesitation and is asking you to meet it with calm presence, not pressure. The connection between you is entering a phase where subtle energy speaks louder than words. Your tone, your timing, your ability to remain emotionally steady. These things matter more now than grand gestures. A single moment of genuine understanding can undo years of silent suffering, but only if it arrives without force. Something else is unfolding quietly. Your soulmate is starting to sense that they cannot continue carrying everything alone. This realization feels both relieving and frightening. Relief comes from the possibility of being seen. Fear comes from the risk of being misunderstood. They are standing between these two emotions, unsure which one will win. Heaven is creating space for trust to grow naturally, not through urgency, but through consistency. Small moments of emotional safety are being offered. A shared silence that feels comfortable instead of awkward. A conversation that goes deeper without becoming heavy. A feeling that they do not have to perform or pretend. These moments are not random, they are foundations. What is being built now is not excitement, but security. And security is what allows truth to breathe. You might notice that old assumptions no longer feel accurate. Things you once thought were distance may now feel like fatigue. What you interpreted as indifference may reveal itself as overwhelm. This shift in perception is crucial. Heaven is helping you see beyond behavior and into emotion. Your soulmate's pain was never about lack of care. It was about carrying too much responsibility for too long. They believed love meant endurance without complaint. But love without expression slowly erodes connection. As this understanding deepens, a new choice becomes possible. A choice to respond with empathy instead of reaction. A choice to listen without fixing. A choice to allow vulnerability without fear. These choices will shape what happens next, far more than any word spoken in the heat of emotion. What comes after this stage will feel like a turning point, even if it looks ordinary from the outside. The silence between you is changing. It is no longer empty. It is becoming honest. Heaven is not rushing this process, because what is meant to last must be built carefully. The pain your soulmate carried is not disappearing instantly, but it is losing its power now that it is no longer hidden. Awareness is dissolving isolation. Presence is replacing fear. This is the moment where emotional truth prepares to step forward, not as a demand, but as an invitation. Stay grounded, stay observant, stay open. The next shift will require steadiness, because once truth begins to flow, it cannot be forced back into silence. A deeper layer is opening now, one that most people never reach because it requires honesty without armor. Your soulmate is beginning to feel the weight of their own unspoken truth pressing against their chest, not as pain anymore, but as urgency. They are realizing that staying silent has started to cost them pieces of themselves. Their laughter feels thinner, their patience feels heavier, their sense of connection feels fragile. This awareness is not sudden. It has been forming slowly, like a quiet ache that finally demands attention. Heaven is allowing this discomfort not to punish them, but to wake them. because comfort in silence was slowly turning into emotional distance, and distance, once normalized, becomes dangerous to any bond. This stage is critical. It is where endurance turns into a decision, and that decision is no longer about hiding, but about choosing whether truth is worth the risk. You may sense a shift in how they look at you, even if nothing is said. Their eyes may linger, their words may carry pauses, their presence may feel heavier with meaning. This is not tension, this is preparation. Your soulmate is testing emotional safety, not with big confessions, but with subtle openness. They are observing how you respond to small truths before trusting you with the bigger ones. Heaven is watching these moments closely because they determine whether the heart feels safe enough to open fully. This is where many connections fail, not because love is absent, but because patience is. The urge to rush clarity, to demand answers, or to assume conclusions can shut down vulnerability instantly. What is needed now is steadiness, calm, a willingness to sit with uncertainty without letting fear speak louder than understanding. There is something important you must recognize. Your soulmate's pain is not just emotional, it is also about identity. They have been questioning who they are when they are not being strong for everyone else. They have been wondering if they are allowed to need support without losing respect. This internal conflict has shaped their behavior more than you realize. Heaven is guiding them toward the truth that vulnerability does not diminish strength, it reveals it. But this truth must be experienced, not explained. It must be felt through response, not promised through words. That is why your energy matters more than any speech. When they sense acceptance without judgment, their defenses soften naturally. When they feel pressure, they retreat. This balance is delicate, and it is being tested now. Old emotional walls are starting to crack, but cracks do not mean collapse. They mean light is finding a way in. Your soulmate is beginning to imagine a version of connection where they do not have to carry everything alone. This possibility feels unfamiliar, even risky, but it also feels relieving. Heaven is encouraging this imagination, because hope is the first step toward healing. At the same time, fear still whispers. Fear of disappointment, fear of misunderstanding, fear of being seen too clearly. These opposing forces are colliding inside them, and the outcome will depend on what they experience next. Not what they are told, not what they are promised, but how they are met in the moments where honesty feels exposed. This phase will not last forever. A choice is forming, silence or truth, distance or depth. What happens next will redefine the connection in a way that cannot be undone. Heaven is not demanding perfection. Heaven is asking for presence, for emotional maturity, for the courage to hold space without control. Your soulmate's silent pain is transforming now. It is becoming a voice, and when that voice finally speaks, it will not ask to be fixed. It will ask to be understood. Stay steady. Stay open. The next step will change everything. Something irreversible is beginning to take shape now, and it is happening quietly, without announcement. Your soulmate is no longer asking themselves if they should speak. They are asking themselves when. This shift is subtle, but powerful. It means the fear that once kept everything locked inside is losing its control. They are realizing that silence has not protected the bond the way they hoped. Instead, it has created gaps filled with assumptions, doubts, and emotional fatigue. This realization carries weight. It brings sadness for the time lost, but it also brings clarity. Heaven is present in this clarity. Heaven does not rush it, but it supports it. Because once a heart reaches this stage, it cannot return to pretending. The truth is no longer a threat. It has become a necessity. You may feel an unusual emotional intensity building around you, even if nothing outward has changed. This is because emotional decisions are being made internally before they are ever spoken aloud. Your soulmate is preparing themselves for the possibility of being fully seen. They are rehearsing honesty, not to manipulate outcomes, but to survive emotionally. They want relief. They want peace. They want to stop carrying a weight that was never meant to be carried alone. Heaven understands this desire deeply. That is why your role right now is not to push, question, or assume. Your role is to remain emotionally available without expectation. This kind of presence is rare. It creates safety without pressure. And safety is what allows truth to arrive without fear. There is a truth you need to understand clearly. When your soulmate finally speaks, it may not sound dramatic. It may not match the intensity of everything they have felt inside. Do not mistake softness for insignificance. Quiet honesty often carries the deepest pain. They may speak carefully. They may choose words slowly. They may even pause mid-sentence, unsure if they should continue. Moments like this tend to feel heavier than they look on the surface. Nothing dramatic is happening in the physical sense, yet internally, there is a shift that changes how everything is experienced. It is the kind of emotional space where silence carries meaning, and even simple awareness feels charged with something unspoken. In situations like this, what matters most is not rushing toward explanations or trying to force clarity through words. Clarity has a natural rhythm, and when emotions are involved, it often arrives in layers rather than all at once. Sometimes the most important thing is simply allowing space for understanding to form on its own, without pressure or expectation. When someone is carrying emotions they have not fully expressed, there is usually a reason they remain unspoken for a while. It is rarely about lack of feeling. More often, it is about uncertainty. Uncertainty about how those feelings will be received, how they will change existing dynamics, or how vulnerable it might make them feel. Emotional honesty, while powerful, also requires a sense of safety to emerge fully. That is why moments of silence between two people can feel so significant, not because nothing is happening, but because something internal is still forming. Thoughts are being processed, memories are being reevaluated, and emotions are slowly moving from unspoken awareness toward expression. This process cannot be rushed without losing its natural depth. At the same time, the person receiving this emotional energy often becomes more sensitive without realizing it. There can be a quiet shift in perception where subtle changes feel more noticeable than before. Tone, timing, distance, or even small gestures begin to carry more meaning than usual. This is not imagination. It is how emotional awareness often expands when connection feels important. However, it is also important not to overinterpret every signal. Emotional situations can easily lead the mind to fill gaps with assumptions, especially when clarity has not yet fully arrived. The healthiest approach in these moments is balance, staying open to what unfolds, while not attaching certainty to what is still forming. When someone is preparing to express something meaningful, the process is often internal, long before it becomes visible externally. There is reflection, hesitation, and a kind of emotional weighing of consequences. They may revisit past interactions in their mind, reconsider how they felt in earlier moments, and slowly arrive at a point where staying silent feels heavier than speaking. This does not mean that everything becomes instantly clear or resolved. More often, it marks the beginning of a transition rather than the completion of one. Expression, when it finally comes, tends to be imperfect, partial, or carefully measured at first. People rarely reveal everything at once when emotions are deeply involved. Instead, they test emotional safety gradually. In these moments, the response they receive becomes just as important as the expression itself, not because the goal is to control the outcome, but because emotional honesty needs space to exist without pressure. When someone feels that their truth can be met with patience, rather than immediate judgment or reaction, they are more likely to continue opening up. What often gets overlooked in emotionally intense situations is the importance of presence, not presence as in physical closeness alone, but emotional presence, the ability to remain steady, attentive, and grounded without trying to fix or direct the moment. This kind of presence communicates safety more effectively than words sometimes can. It is also natural for this kind of situation to create anticipation. When something feels like it is building beneath the surface, the mind becomes more alert, more aware of subtle changes, more sensitive to emotional cues. Time can feel different in these moments because attention is no longer fully on routine experiences, but partially focused on what feels unresolved. Still, the most important part of this process is not prediction, but patience. Emotional truth cannot be forced into a timeline. It unfolds when internal resistance begins to soften and when expression feels more possible than suppression. That moment cannot be controlled from the outside. It can only be met when it arrives. As this continues to develop, one of the most meaningful shifts that can happen is the movement from assumption to understanding. Assumption fills silence with meaning that may not be accurate. Understanding waits for reality to reveal itself before forming conclusions. That difference alone can change how a situation feels internally. There is also a quiet transformation that happens when emotional honesty starts to emerge. Even if it is incomplete or cautious at first, it changes the tone of the connection. What was once uncertain begins to feel more real. What was once imagined begins to be grounded in actual expression. And that shift, even if small, can reshape emotional perception significantly. At the same time, it is important to remember that no single conversation defines the entire future of a connection. Emotional growth is rarely contained in one moment. It unfolds across time, through consistency, through behavior, and through repeated experiences of trust or understanding. One moment may open a door, but what happens after determines where it leads. For the person holding unspoken emotions, reaching the point of expression is often not about sudden courage, but about gradual internal readiness. It is the moment when the emotional pressure of silence becomes greater than the fear of being misunderstood. That transition is deeply personal and cannot be rushed from the outside. For the person receiving it, the most grounding response is often not immediate analysis, but steadiness. Allowing space for the moment to exist without trying to shape it too quickly gives honesty the room it needs to settle. In emotionally sensitive situations, rushing interpretation can sometimes interrupt understanding before it fully forms. What is unfolding here is not just a moment of communication, but a shift in emotional structure. Silence is beginning to lose its role as protection and slowly turning into something that needs resolution, and expression is beginning to move from fear toward possibility. That transition is delicate, and it deserves time. In the end, what matters most is not forcing meaning, but allowing meaning to reveal itself naturally. Emotional truth is most stable when it is not pressured into form too early. It becomes clearer with patience, steadier with time, and more grounded when met with calm awareness rather than urgency. Whatever follows, will not be defined by intensity alone, but by how honestly and calmly the moment is held when it arrives.